Hello, week 2 on codependency and understanding codependency. And last week, I asked you to ponder some questions while we're going over this. The questions are, how would you rate your codependency on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being very codependent, 1 being a little bit codependent. How has your home life or your relationships with your family impacted your view of yourself? How aware are you of your own personal boundary space? What are the 3 things that you need in recovery? And I tell you, one of the things that everyone needs in recovery from no matter what it is forgiveness. That needs to be number 1. Always trying to forgive and neutralize certain behaviors that you were taught during the course of your upbringing that you did not mean to project onto others. And how has the lack of boundaries caused problems for you in your life, your relationships, and your family? So as we go along these categories, I really want you to think about this. Now, all of this is in a book by Melanie Beatty called Codependent No More. And this is the material that they use in rehabs. If you're at a family week and you have an alcoholic or a drug addict, this is what you will use to understand your level of codependency. We used to talk a lot about tough love when we were dealing with addicts and alcoholics, but I think we have a better view now of the disease of alcoholism and the disease of drug addiction. And it's not exactly tough love, it's love with boundaries and understanding that you cannot support an addict's behavior by feeding them a lot of money and or other things that aid and abet them, so to speak, to do what they are doing. So we'll talk more about that as we progress. Caretaking codependence, which is, I think, what category I would put myself in as a caretaking codependent, recognizing that I actually made that into a career and have been caretaking people for 30 plus years now. And certainly it does feed my self-esteem to be able to help somebody to have a recognition of some of their own family issues or to change some behaviors that have caused them great angst or to help them look at themselves in regards to forgiveness and learning to love themselves. So in that regard, that's been a positive for me. And a lot of counselors, a lot of people in the healing arts go into it with caretaking codependency issues. The problem becomes when the boundaries get blurred and the counselor is blurring boundaries. For example, my husband went to a counselor and she texted him that she loved his beautiful heart. I thought my daughter, I'd have to scrape her off the ceiling since she runs a mental health agency, and she was like, no, Papa, that's not a good counselor. So that's an example of how it blurs lines, okay? You have to watch what you're doing. Make sure that if you are going to a counselor that you counsel shop and that you're actually getting some value from your counselor. So a caretaking codependent may think and feel responsible for others, okay? Trying to tell them a better way to do it or understand things differently. But remember, I told you last week the story of a woman who would call the office if the husband was on a binge drink the night before and say that John was sick today. Well, that's her being responsible for him rather than him doing something himself. Codependent caretakers often try to anticipate other people's needs. Now, I told you Billy was also a codependent, and this is where he gets into his codependency. If I say get up to do something, I don't know, open the door for the dogs or whatever, or feed the dogs, he's Johnny on the spot, up on his feet, kind of getting in my way to do that for me. Or, in some form or fashion, I mean, that's a silly example, but it's the only example that came to mind. Or in some form or fashion telling me something and I say to him, I didn't just fall off a turnip truck, Bill. I kind of get that. So that's his way of being codependent. He's anticipating my needs and he's jumping to my rescue. And, codependents that are caretakers are often rescuers and use that, form of behavior to feed their own self-esteem and to help other people. But sometimes it just is annoying. So I will get annoyed at Bill when he jumps in front of me to do something that I can do myself. Please others instead of themselves. This is something a caretaker, codependent does. They go along to get along. Going along to getting along sometimes is great because you can choose how you want to compromise and how you want to balance your life. But if you go along to get along every single time, then you're in trouble with yourself. You are not really valuing your own opinions, respecting how you feel, and be able to, speak clearly, communicate well what your true feelings are, and you're negating yourself. And don't we have enough negation around us in the world today without negating ourselves? Um, Codependents that are caretakers feel safest when they're giving. These are the kind of people who give, and they have no ability to receive. They're the people that if you compliment them, oh, what a pretty dress, oh, this whole thing, this is, oh, blah, 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 instead of just saying thank you, okay? Sometimes I can recognize how codependent someone is when they've had a loss and I said, oh, I'm so sorry that you lost your sister, for example. They'll be coming in to see me and I we'll be doing a reading, connecting them to their sister or whatnot. I'm so sorry you lost your sister, I'll say. And they'll say, that's okay. Well, that's not the thing to say, guys. It's never okay to suffer a loss. You don't say that's okay when someone is trying to give you some energy of support. You say, thank you. It's been very difficult for me, or I appreciate it. You can say things that are not poor me and still be in a state of energy where you're balanced with appreciation and not saying it's okay that you've had this happen to you. So sometimes those people are victim codependents. So you have to, listen to what people say. Listen. We really just don't listen anymore. We've got to start listening to each other. Feel sad because they spend their whole lives giving to others and nobody gives to them. Oh, these people can be martyrs, okay? And martyrs, you know what they name after martyrs, don't you? Churches and fire hydrants. Dog. Fire hydrant, in case you didn't get that. Anyway, pee on me and I'll be free. No. Codependents that have this kind of martyrdom are really wasting the value of their spirit. It's great to be compassionate. Oh, please be compassionate. Please be caring. But not to the degree where you're walking around, oh, I have to do this and oh, I have to do that, and then writing about it on Facebook. Oh, I went and did this, I went and did that. My daughter-in-law, Allison, is the best person as an example of someone who does great things and never puts it on Facebook. She goes and she does charitable things all the time. She goes to food kitchens and she gives, but nobody knows it but her and me, because I'll say, what did you do today? And she'll tell me. That's fantastic. Why aren't we more like that, where we have to say, hey, look at me, I did this, I did that? Yeah, well, that's because you might be a little bit into your martyrdom. Although it's not bad to be able to contribute in a way in which you can receive your accolades and so on. It just turns into codependency when you have to tell somebody over and over and over and over again so that they think you're awesome, right? That's the martyrdom part. Feel compelled to help others solve their problems, such as offering unwanted advice, like the lady in the store when I bought paint, and I told you last week, said you shouldn't paint when you're pregnant, dear, and I wasn't. Giving rapid fire suggestions, you really should do this, you really should do that, what would make you feel better, what, this, with that, okay, or trying to fix other people's feelings. Can you fix other people's feelings? Really? No, you can't. And that's what I was talking to you about in the beginning, when people say it's okay because they've had a terrible situation, other people try to fix that in all kinds of ways. When you say thank you, people aren't trying to fix your feelings, okay? So, and lastly, caretaking codependents may say yes when they mean no, doing things they don't really want to do, doing more than their fair share of work, and doing things other people are capable of doing themselves. It must be exhausting to be always working so hard to take care of everybody and do everything and think for other people and all of those things. Caretaking codependents must be exhausted. So make sure that if you're feeling like you're exhausted from helping everybody and that no one helps you, make sure that you're changing that for sure. I was so grateful for all of the help that I received during my cancer recovery. I can't begin to tell you the amount of things that were sent to us in food and so on. It was so wonderful, and I appreciated that so much. But none of that was in codependence. Like nobody was codependent about that. They were just concerned and caring. There's a difference. So look at how those differences work, okay? Now we're going to move on to low self-worth codependence. Okay, so this is again somebody that wants to be liked so badly that they'll do anything to be liked. This is what I was talking about at the beginning of last week's lecture in regards to somebody who's a chameleon and has to change themselves or turn themselves inside out in order to be liked. They come from troubled, repressed, or dysfunctional families, okay? And because they come from troubled, repressed, and dysfunctional families, they may have chosen to be the good boy or the good girl in order to make the family run. They're the kind of people who, if you stop being codependent with them, if you stop allowing them to get into your space, they don't know what to do. So they may abandon the relationship because they don't know how to have a relationship without codependency. They may deny that their family was troubled, repressed, or dysfunctional. They blame themselves for everything. Now let's talk about a molest victim for a minute, okay? Because, you know, we're splitting a lot of hairs on some of this, and I want you to really have clear sight on different parts of understanding codependency and victimization and all of those things. A molest victim always blames themselves in some form or fashion, okay? For one thing, they may blame themselves because they didn't say anything to anybody, because they were scared, they were threatened, whatever. Or they may blame themselves because they feel like somehow there was something about them that they were chosen to be the molestation victim. There is a lot of that blame and shame that goes along with that, that really is unwarranted blame and shame. It's never your fault. You never asked for it. You never went along with it. You never, ever, ever need to feel like you need to blame yourself or have guilt over or have shame over it. What you need to do is go to a good therapist and help clear that for yourself. That is not a level of codependency. Low self-worth codependents reject compliments and praise. We just went over an example of that. They think they're not quite good enough. You know, imposter syndrome should be a segment that I do here on not only Melinda Plus, but probably should do a podcast on it, because it's quite prevalent for people that suffer from imposter syndrome, like they don't deserve the success that they've had, or they feel fake, or they feel like it's not real, and so on. Actually, doctors are the #1 profession that suffers from imposter syndrome. So I think maybe we should do something along those lines. But so low self-worth codependents think they're never quite good enough. So they're always trying to show that they're good enough, good enough, good enough. They fear rejection, probably because in their family of origin they had some form of rejection. They take things very personally. These are the people that are always defensive. They take everything personally, and they feel like victims. And guess what? Through the law of attraction, if you feel like a victim, what's going to happen? You're going to attract more to victimize you with, because remember, the law of attraction is real, that the energy of God is like a giant mirror, that whatever we put out emotionally gets reflected back to us, that God is not a thinking God, but rather a feeling energy, and that with our given free will and the process of working out our karmic profile, when we feel certain things, it comes back at us and we repeat that feeling over and over again. You have to nip that stuff in the bud, go back to the origin of the the feeling, clear it, understand it, balance it, integrate your inner child into your adulthood so that you're not always walking around feeling defensive, like somebody's rejecting you or like you're always the victim. Make sure that you understand these things so that you can take care of you and find a way so that you can work things out here on the earth plane, which again I feel is hell. So when you get to heaven, you can stay there because nobody really wants to be back in hell. These folks are afraid to make mistakes. And, that's so silly. If we don't make mistakes, we don't learn. And mistakes can really bear us fruit. But somehow, because their self-esteem is so low, if they make a mistake, they feel frozen by it. They feel mortified. They feel like, oh my gosh, and they ruminate about it and they go over it and over it and over it in their heads, and they have a hard time forgiving the circumstances around it or forgiving themselves their reaction. And some of our reactions are just born out of our brains, our ancient brains, where we are in fight, flight, or freeze, right? That part of our brain that just reacts rather than responds. And yes, we can learn how to better that, and so that we're not constantly in fight, flight, or freeze, but we have to recognize it first. So they expect themselves to do everything perfectly. Everything has to be perfect. Back to Bill. Poor Bill, right? But Bill is the guy that in my pantry has to have the cans lined up in perfection. He came from a very dysfunctional family. He had a very difficult stepmother. She was very unreasonable with him. He was her scapegoat child. It caused him to grow up with some control issues and some low self-esteem issues. And I don't care if everything looks great in the pantry. In fact, I appreciate it. So it doesn't bother me, and it is actually just something that he does. So it doesn't really matter, but it's a form of his perfection. And I just thought I'd use it as an example of how sometimes that perfectionism can be difficult. Now, when perfectionism gets to the point where you're driving yourself crazy and you've got obsessive compulsive thoughts over that, then you have to really recognize and find balance around it so that you're not such a perfectionist that you can't cope with yourself or your life, because life is a mess. Everything in life is messy, and we do what we can to control our environment around us in a manner that we feel as safe as possible, which goes into another subject that we've talked about that was on a podcast with a lovely lady about making sure your home environment is in balance and harmony so that you feel like you've got some order around your life, because that's important in spirituality, to not feel like you're in chaos all the time, but not in perfection. People who have this kind of codependency have a lot of shoulds. I shoulda, woulda, coulda. I should have done this. I should have done that. Have you ever had a conversation with yourself after a conversation with someone? Oh, I should have said this to them, or I should have said that to them, or I wish I hadn't said that, or I wish I hadn't done that. Okay, that's because your self-esteem is so low that you are second guessing yourself all the time. And let's just say you did say something that was inappropriate. Well, hopefully you learn from it. You can't change it. So to ruminate and worry about it is doing you absolutely no good, except taking up space in your brain and, causing you to have bad feelings that you can make choices not to have. You can say, well, I'll learn from this instead. So it's really important to know that. Feel a lot of guilt. This is, again, guilt is a useless emotion. My mother used to say that Jewish mothers created guilt and Catholic mothers perfected it. There are certain upbringings where we are taught guilt, and I'm not sure. I got to ask God when I get up there. I need to talk to Jesus when I get to heaven. Why the heck do we have guilt? I don't get it, but we do. We feel guilty about certain things for sure, and we can't really fix or change it. All we can do is forgive it and move on. Feel ashamed of who they are. Oh, this hurts my heart when people feel ashamed of who they are. Usually people feel ashamed of who they are because of the circumstances of their upbringing, and there was a lot of shame included in the household. And it's a hard cycle to break for sure. But, you know, again, through spirituality and understanding that we are all connected as one and that we are all deeply loved in heaven, we can move that energy out of our vibration and turn it into something where we can appreciate ourselves and go into a better place of understanding. Think their lives aren't worth living, so they try to help other people live their lives. Get artificial feelings of self-worth from helping others. And, you know, again, a lot of people in the helping fields are this type of codependent. When they don't have boundaries, it's a problem. When they do have boundaries, it's not. Get strong feelings of low self-worth, almost embarrassment if they fail. You know, we all fail. Success isn't 100% through life. We all have failures that we need to learn from. They are gifts for us. That failures are gifts for us to learn. Try to prove that they're good enough for other people. Settle for being needed rather than wanted. Believe other people could not possibly like or love them. Thank you for week 2 on codependency. We'll be moving into week 3 on codependency and then into our numerology. But second Thursday of the month, so I will see you Thursday for live readings. Bill will be sending you a Zoom link, and he and I will see you then. And you have a great week.